Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin.
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back once again to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, Adam Bradshaw, and as ever, it is an absolute honour, a privilege, and a pleasure to invite you back to the Dram Association YouTube channel for an SMWS OutTurn. And for the first time today, we are actually having the OutTurn from our new Dram Association studio, the Strath studio here. If you haven't tuned into the last couple of Drinking Out Louds, then this is new surroundings for you, and I am very grateful for the extra space today. The extra space, by the way, provided to me by the wonderful folks at the Strathcona Hotel, who have given me the use of one of their hotel rooms for the time being. And I'm very grateful for this extra space because we are back to a full Scotch Malt Whisky Society OutTurn today. We're not splitting it in half like we did for the last month. In June, we are doing all of it in one tasting, so we have 6 brand new releases for you here today, and they are going to be spectacular, I guarantee it. But first, the opening dram, because it is always very important to stretch. Today's opening dram I'm going to use for illustrative purposes, because although the vast majority of you joining in right now for the premiere of this episode are probably already Scotch Malt Whisky Society members, there are always going to be a few people that tune in afterwards, or maybe even tune in live, who have no idea what the hell the Scotch Malt Whisky Society is. So please allow me to introduce you to the SMWS. So the Scotch Malt Whisky Society is a membership-based independent bottler of single cask whisky. Predominantly Scotch malt whisky, hence the name Scotch Malt Whisky Society, but they do also bottle whiskies and other spirits from all around the world. And they've even started dabbling in blends these days. So how it works is you have to become a member, and once you're a member, you can buy the bottles. And each one of these bottles is utterly unique. They're not just a single malt, they are a single cask, and there's a huge difference between those two terms. A single malt simply means that it's 100% malt whiskey from a single distillery, but it's still a blend of hundreds, if not thousands, of casks that are blended together to produce a quintessential style for that distillery. They are looking for consistency in their product, but whiskey is not robotic. It's not an exact science. Every batch of whiskey will turn out slightly differently, and you will always end up with utterly unique casks of whiskey. Every single cask is completely different, and that is what the Scotch Malt Whisky Society specializes in, uniqueness. So rather than having several thousand bottles of a whiskey that all taste the same, they have gone for, in this case, 235 bottles of a whiskey, which is completely unique to any other whiskey on the planet. And that excites me and a lot of other whiskey lovers to no end. So the official name of this whiskey is SMWS Society Cask Number 26.127, and I'll explain a little bit about what that means later. But it gives you a lot of information on this label. Gives it a nickname, Juicy Delight, gives it a bit of a write-up. Dipping brioche into honey with cinnamon salt, water taffy, neat, whilst diluted, freshly cut beechwood and pineapple tofu with coconut rice, which sounds fantastic. It says it's a single malt Scotch whisky, single cask, distilled on the 19th of September 2011. It is a second fill barrel, ex-bourbon, and it is from the Highlands. This one is cask strength, as all single cask releases are from the SMWS, at 60.9% ABV, and it also says that it's 7 years old. So that is very cool. Actually, it doesn't say 7 years old. My apologies. It says 7 years aged, and there is actually a difference there for whiskey. If you're not aware, it doesn't actually matter how old the whiskey is. It matters how long it was aged for in a cask. So despite the fact that this was distilled on the 19th of September 2011 and is currently now June 2020, it doesn't matter that this is almost 9 years old. What matters is it spent at least between 7 and 8 years in a cask. So it's 7 years aged. And that is the important part. Yeah, and that's pretty much all the information that you really need to understand and appreciate this whiskey. But the Scotch Malt Whisky Society also will give you a much more detailed full write-up from their expert panel in Edinburgh, Scotland. So this is what the panel has to say about Juicy Delight. Immediately, we were dipping a rich and buttery brioche into honey before a whiff of freshly squeezed lime and salty sea spray teased our olfactory system. On the palate, neat, all very refreshing, like mint-flavoured lozenges and cinnamon-flavoured saltwater taffy, with a hint of sorghum in the finish. With a drop of water, a very citric aroma greeted us at first, before the warming scent of vanilla pudding, as well as a freshly cut beechwood pile of firewood. We then tasted yummy pineapple tofu with coconut rice, followed by white chocolate and cardamom mousse. So you'll recognise a lot of that from the tasting notes on the bottle itself. These are just a distilled down form of the official full tasting notes, which you can get either in print medium at the tastings or at the partner bars or what have you, or available at the official websites of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, which smws.com for the British one, or, of course, smws.ca for the society here in Canada. We have our own very special branch here in Canada, run by Robin Kelly Carpenter, and it's slightly different here than it is in the rest of the world. So once you're a member, of course, you're a member globally, but for Canadian members, you have the ability to buy Scotch Malt Whisky Society whiskies from one of 4 different stores in Canada. And those stores are the Kensington Wine Market over in Calgary, Alberta, Keg and Cork in Edmonton, Alberta, the Legacy Liquor Store in Vancouver in British Columbia, and right here at the Strath in Victoria, British Columbia. And whereas a lot of parts of the world you have to you have to buy them online and get them shipped to your door, and there's not really many chances for tastings and events. We're quite lucky here in Canada. We're actually very lucky that Robin Kelly decided to create the society in the way that they did. I think it's built a really beautiful community of whiskey lovers here in Canada, and many of you are watching right now. You guys are beautiful. Extra special welcome to anyone who is a SMWS member, not based here in Victoria. I mean, obviously, I love the local guys. I love you to bits, but it's always cool to meet new members and bring them into the fold a little bit. So if you're in the chat right now and you're from anywhere outside of Victoria, say hi. We don't bite. We're a lovely bunch of people. And we'll welcome you into the fold. So the one thing missing with an SMWS bottle that you might be thinking that's not on the label, you didn't tell us everything. Where's it from? What distillery is it? Well, as I mentioned, the whole point of the SMWS is that this is a completely unique whiskey, different to anything else that distillery has ever put out. That being said, of course, distilleries do have certain characteristics which follow through for a lot of their distillates. You will occasionally get a whiskey from a distillery which tastes absolutely nothing like their normal whiskies, but not always. And in this case, this is relatively true to form for this distillery's flavour profile. So the distillery number is 26. This is Distillery 26, edition 127. So the 127 is actually the cask number. So they've bottled 127 casks from Distillery 26. They visit distilleries and give them new codes in the order that they bottle them. So this is the 26th distillery that the Scotch Malt Whisky Society have bottled a whiskey from, and that happens to be a personal favourite of mine, and it happens to be Clynelish. Now, Clynelish has a very unfortunate origin story which revolves around the brutal Highland clearances by the first Duke of Sutherland, where thousands of Scots were displaced and some even lost their lives as their houses were torn down or burned to the ground. This then is a great example of how things can kind of turn around, how you can get great things from terrible situations. In no way does the building of Clynelish Distillery excuse the despicable actions of the Duke, but at least over 200 years later, we have a delicious dram of whiskey which we can toast the people whose lives were ruined by his actions and think of them fondly and remember them. We can also take solace in the fact that Clynelish was actually a financial failure during the Duke's tenure, and it only actually gained its now very enviable reputation in the whiskey industry after it was sold to blenders, Ainsley and Hailburn. And I have no idea who Ainsley and Hailburn are. Never heard of them. They're probably one of hundreds and thousands of blending houses that fell to the wayside. And, back in the day, every corner store was basically their own blending house. They had their own house style. And, eventually we're down to the final competitors. Eventually, as with anything, there'll be one blending house to rule them all. I really hope that does not happen. Variety is the spice of life, in whiskey especially, and I truly believe that that will not happen in whiskey. But yes, there's certainly not as many blends as there used to be. Although there's probably actually, if you go far enough back in time, that's definitely true. But if you go back 10 years ago, there's probably a lot more blends now than there were 10 years ago. Thinking about it. So Kleinlich, as I said, personal favourite of mine and a big favourite with a lot of blending houses, especially people like Compass Box, or of course Diageo, who own the distillery now. It's a key player in their Johnny Walker malts. It was actually featured in one of the 512 different Game of Thrones whiskies they released in the last couple of years. I think it was called the Song of Ice, maybe. It was a Kleinlich heavy blend. And what Kleinlich brings to the party is this beautiful viscosity, this waxy mouthfeel, but also a sort of honey beeswax flavor that perfectly accompanies that experience. And the nose of this one, a whiskey that I'm quite familiar with, by the way. This is a repeat. This is my stretch. This is my opening dram. This is me just warming up for the main show. This is a whiskey I'm quite familiar with. I've already had a bottle. I've gone through it. And it's one I really enjoy, hence revisiting it now. And the one thing I get on the nose of this one, though, which it doesn't really say in the official tasting notes on the nose until you've added water, but I get this without the water, is this beautiful citrus lemon drop thing, almost like a lemon lozenge or a coffee drop. It mentions some kind of lozenge. I think it talks about mint flavored lozenges in the official tasting note. I don't really get mint on the nose, but I definitely get that sort of rescue remedy, this sort of cold and flu honey lemon drop thing. Actually, if you have a cold or got a bit of flu right now, this would perk you right up. It's cask strength medicine is what you got here. Yeah. Really just solid Kleinlich. And Kleinlich is a whiskey we just don't get very often here in BC anymore. The official bottle in Kleinlich 14 has fallen off the map. I haven't seen it in a couple of years. And there's very few independently bottled Kleinlichs that come. So to have one of this quality from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society is a delight. I'm going to try it with water. Because it mentions... What does it mention? Something about pineapple and tofu and coconut rice. It sounds really quite delicious. I should add I'm quite hungry right now, so I might be susceptible to delicious sounding meals. But that does sound good right now. It does say vanilla pudding after you've added water, and I'm not sure about the pudding, but the vanilla, yep. Yeah, there's a certain tropical note coming through now. After you've added water, there's definitely more air of the tropics. It's beautiful. That is very nice. So yeah, that is my introduction to the Scotch Malt Whisky Society for those of you who aren't familiar, and that is my introduction or reintroduction to Juicy Delight, a whiskey that I wholeheartedly recommend. We have one, maybe two bottles left at strathliquor.com. They can be yours for the stunning price of $164.26. And yeah, if you want to pick one of those up right now, it's available on the website. Be my guest. I thoroughly recommend it. If you like Kleinlich, it's Kleinlich. It's quite true to character, but still utterly unique, and that's good. That's a good thing. And what else is a good thing? Well, we're about to start a whole new OutTurn. Welcome to the month of June, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of Canada. June OutTurn starts right now. So I hope you've all had the appropriate Pavlovian response to the intro music. I hope you're salivating and ready to hear about some whiskey. It is time to kick things off. I will just mention how this works. I will first of all be telling you the official SMWS tasting notes for the new whiskey, then revealing what it is, talking about my own impressions of it, and then moving on to the next one until we've done all 6. And then finally, once we've revealed all 6, I'm going to be revealing the price and putting them officially for sale at strathliquor.com, where we have moved to a brand new server, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it won't crash, which is going to be very exciting. I look forward to having a website that does not crash. So, whiskey number 1 today is called Lots of Nice Things. And that's not just me saying it's got a long-winded name, it's actually called Lots of Nice Things. The first and best comment was, a lot of nice things going on, like opening a full sweet pick and mix paper party bag. It brings out the hidden child in you, so let yourself be surprised. Have a drizzle of clear, floral, slightly earthy, slightly spicy honey direct from a wooden spoon and let that warm glow take over and your mind wander. With a little water, we imagine walking the dog on a pleasant, warm autumn Friday afternoon through a pine forest still wet with the rain. The taste had a sweet earthiness and calmness in the knowledge that the weekend lay ahead. Okay, well that just sounds wonderful. I should actually explain the full sweet pick and mix paper party bag phenomenon, because it only just triggered the memory in my own head, and for a lot of people that didn't grow up in the 90s in Britain, that's not going to mean much. So it's referring to these pre-made sort of party favor bags, where if you had a birthday party in the 90s, you were expected that all of your guests, this is for kids obviously, all of the kids would get a little bag to take home, and it would contain maybe a small comic like a Beano or a Dandy or something, and a few different varieties of candy, maybe a small plastic toy or something along those lines. Yeah, I don't quite understand the reason for that. Maybe it's kind of a way of saying, sorry, we dragged you along to another dull birthday party where you have to sing happy birthday and have a store-bought slab cake and wear paper hats. At least you get to take something fun home. I don't know where that comes from, but they were always very exciting because you never knew what surprise candies you were going to get inside. And that's a bit like this whiskey, which contains a lot of surprise candy flavors, which I'm calling it candy. When have I said candy? Sweetie. Lots of nice sweeties. All right. So this is bottle 66.159, and that's going to surprise an awful lot of you who know what 66 is already. And I will explain that in a little while. But let's go through the other pertinent information of the bottle. So this is one of 208 bottles in existence. It is distilled on the 5th of January 2007. It was matured in a first fill barrel, ex-bourbon. It is from the Highland region. It is 12 years old, and it is an ABV of 61.9%. All right. A lot of information there for you to take in. And yeah, this is going to be cool, because this is a style of whiskey that, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't tried before. It's also a style of whiskey that I kind of disagree on the name with the SMWS. But before we get into that heated argument, let's crack open this bottle and see what it's all about. Alrighty. So for those of you who tuned into the Fagile Ricladi vertical tasting I did this time last week, I had a very, very disappointing bottle pop there. It left me feeling hollow and empty inside. I opened it up and the cork was loose. It hardly made a sound. It was just awful. That is one thing that you can always guarantee from the SMWS. I mean, you can guarantee many things, incredible flavour being one of them, but a fantastic, satisfying cork pull, always one. Oh yeah, never lets me down. Okay, nice golden colour. First fill ex-bourbon makes a lot of sense. 12 years old, exactly what you'd expect. Yeah, candy is... I'm doing it again. I'm apparently officially Canadian. I say candy now. Sweeties. Definitely lots of sweets. Lots of different sweets. It's Reminds me of those, I think they're called double dips or dippables or something about dipping. It was like a sachet. It was like a giant sugar packet, but it had three separate sections, and in one section it had a like a solid stick-shaped sort of sherbet lollipop thing. The idea was you would lick that so it was a little damp, and then you'd stick it in one of the other two sections which contained different flavors of sherbet. That was fantastic. I miss those. Probably wouldn't be as good now. Everything tasted better when you were a kid, right? If you go back and have your childhood candies, you're probably going to be very disappointed. I had a UFO, actually. Those foam, sort of almost cardboard tasting things with sherbet in the middle. I remember loving those when I was 7. Absolutely awful. It just tastes like cardboard and sugar. It's nuts. This smells how candy is in my head, though, or how sweets are in my head, not how they are in my new adult palate. Oh yeah, it smells... It does actually smell a little bit like a lot of the candies, or... God, I'm just going to say candies from now on, apparently. A lot of the candies that you would get in those party favor bags. A lot of... what are they called? The fruit salad chews. A lot of sherbets. A lot of those really cheap yellow and pink chewy lollipops. I never understood the chewy lollipop thing. Lollipops are meant to be licked. Why do you make a chewy one? I don't get it. Tasted good though. Or at least I remember it tasting good. Probably tastes awful. But this smells fantastic. Not getting the darker flavors in notes in the official tasting notes. I'm looking at them now. It's a slightly earthy. I'm not really getting anything earthy on the nose yet. Maybe I will after adding water, or maybe I will after tasting it. Oh yeah, that is... That is really good. That is remarkably different to what I was expecting from just getting that straight up candy nose. This is deeper, darker, brooding, surprising whiskey. It feels rustic. It feels like that walk in the forest it mentions. Can't wait to add water and see if that comes out even more. It does feel a little earthy. That's really good, actually. That is beautiful, rich caramels and just a touch of mud. Yeah, I can definitely get on board with this. I'm quietly relieved that this is so good, because 66 is one of my all-time favorite distilleries. But as I mentioned, I've never really had anything of this spirit style, and that's because 66 is usually peated, and this is not. And I was a little worried that maybe the only thing I like about 66 is that light peat balance that you normally get. But this is still absolutely excellent, and there isn't a trace of peat whatsoever. So for folks, there's a few local whiskey guys who don't like the peat whatsoever, who might have never really enjoyed anything from this distillery. This is time to get with Distillery 66. Geordie Mosky, if you're watching, pick up a bottle of this. I think you'll really enjoy it. Jay, yeah, same thing. Jay Prost, I know you don't like peat, so you don't usually like 66. This is a 66 you will probably very much enjoy. Oh yeah, that is really nice. It's got its beautiful earthy darkness. It's like Springbank without the funk, or the peat actually. It's got that earthy rusticness, but Alright, yeah, I'm on board. Let me tell you guys, if you don't know what 66 is, let me tell you what this is. This is officially Ardmore. However, I would call it Ardlair, because that is what Ardmore Distillery actually calls their unpeated malt. But the SMWS is just saying it's an Ardmore, so that's what I'm going to go with as well for the graphics on this, because I don't want to piss off the SMWS. They keep giving me really, really good whiskies to release here in Canada to you guys, and I don't want that to stop. So whatever the SMWS says goes. Ardmore. This distillery was built as the result of the rise in popularity of William Teacher's namesake blend in the 1800s. Of course, that namesake blend being Teacher's, if you didn't catch that. It was built by his son Adam in 1898 in Aberdeenshire, where water, barley and peat were all in abundance. Much like the opening dram today, Clynelish, Ardmore is highly sought after by Blending House, and amazingly, it only got released as an official bottling in 2006, which is disgustingly recent for a whiskey this good. Also, I should mention that still today only 1% of Ardmore is released as a single malt. The rest of it all goes into blends. Despite its relative rarity as a single malt, it is highly sought after by whiskey fans who relish the independent bottlings that you can find on occasion. And we do get a few different independent bottlings here. The SMWS is the most prominent of those here in Canada, in BC at least, and they're just fantastic. The only other Ardmore editions I've ever seen, the only other official bottlings I've ever seen in the Canadian market were the now defunct Traditional, which was their first release back in 2006, which was done in Ex-Lefroy quarter casks. I think you can still get that in travel retail, but certainly not in stores here. And the follow-up from that, the Ardmore Legacy, which you can still get, is about $50, and it's good for $50, but not good compared to this or any other independently bottled Ardmore I've had. No offense to the official bottling. Sorry, Beam Suntory, but you need to up your game on the Ardmore front. You've got a gold mine right there, and you don't know how to use it. So it's one of the last distilleries to stop using coal-fired stills as well, which is really cool. Ardmore actually created an intricate system of steam valves which allows them to replicate the hotspots that would have normally been created by those coal-fired stills. And since the installation of steam, they've started using unpeated malt on occasion with the Ardlair, which is what we're drinking right now. Or what I'm drinking right now, sorry. Didn't mean to make you jealous of me, but I'm drinking it and it's very nice. You can be drinking it too if you pick up a bottle. Yeah, that's really good, and yeah, I'm really happy with that. I hope we get more Ardlair in the future. That's really nice. Whiskey number 2, next up today, is called Blondie Bombshell. Blondie Bombshell. A rather sprightly nose opens on hot cross buns, brandy snaps, ginger cuts, and spiced honey drizzled over granola. A rising scent of warm vapor rub emerges along with some white stone fruits and newspaper ink. A little dilution brings out cola cubes and iron brew cordial with cookie dough, golden syrup flapjacks, and blondie as opposed to a brownie. The palate is thick and sweet with dried papaya, lime peel, sooty, and floral aspects and chunks of honeycomb mixed with bashed up hobnobs. With water, there's pecan pie, toasted chestnuts, mandarin liqueur, baking soda, and a light water cracker dryness. Some lemon-dusted bonbons freshen up the finish. Beautiful. I should mention when it says flapjacks in the tasting notes there, it's talking about British flapjacks, not North American. So don't think pancake. It's if you've never had a flapjack, A, I feel sorry for you, and B, I should make you some flapjacks. I make very good flapjacks. It is a mixture of oats, butter, and golden syrup and sugar that is all, boiled up and melted together and then baked at a low temperature for a little while into a sort of a bar form, and it is just delicious. Very, very unhealthy, but very delicious. And actually, same with hobnobs. If you've never had a hobnob before, it's kind of basically a dry flapjack. It's just it's a dry oat cookie that is traditionally dipped in tea. If you can find your way to a local supermarket, maybe a Fairways or a Thrifties here in Victoria, you can find hobnobs. Actually, they're available here quite freely, and they are well worth hunting down. They are delicious. Back to the regular scheduled programming. Blondie Bombshell. You're probably thinking, where's that from? And I can tell you, it is from Distillery 95. Which you're probably not that familiar with because it's the first time as I understand it right now, it is the first time we've ever had a 95 in the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of Canada. So this is 95.32. It is one of 229 bottles. It was distilled on the 15th of September 2010 from a second fill barrel ex-bourbon. It is from the Speyside region this time. It is 8 years old officially, and or aged 8 years, not 8 years old. There is a difference. I need to be careful with how I say that. And it is 66% ABV. Beautiful sounding whiskey. Let's see how it tastes. Or smells, or both, really. I'm probably going to do both of them. Why not? That's what I'm here for. Yeah, can have a bit more. Treat yourself. Very nice. A little bit of a lighter colour than the last one, as is expected. Even though it's 8 years old, it is from a second fill barrel, so it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be leather coloured. It shouldn't be. That's a sign of a fake colouring. If you've got something that's 8 years old from a second fill barrel that looks like it's a 20-year-old first fill sherry cask, it's yeah, it should look like this, and I'm glad it does. Yeah, definitely getting the baked goods thing. Oats, yeah, sure. Oats is certainly a possibility there. And yeah, there is that sort of, I don't want to say fake sugary sweetness, because like the sugar is real, but it's not like it's not a fruity thing. It's like Iron Brew and Coca-Cola tastes like Iron Brew and Coca-Cola, and this smells a little bit Iron Brew and Coca-Cola like, and I have no idea what the hell Coca-Cola and Iron Brew are supposed to like taste like. They're not imitating something natural. It's its own thing, right? And yeah, this smells a little bit like those two very popular sodas or pops. Interesting. Yeah. Very exciting experience for me, trying a new distillery from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, one I've never had before from these guys. Let's see. I was a little confused with the official tasting notes when it had all of these nice sort of zesty fruits and floral notes, and then just threw the word sooty in there as if it just belonged with everything else. But it is slightly sooty. It's not smoky, it's not peaty in any way, but there is that sort of slightly sooty dustiness going on, which is really intriguing, actually. It's really good. Tropical papaya, sure, yeah, that makes sense. Lime peel, I can get behind that. But there is also a nuttiness, a beautiful nuttiness. It says toasted chestnuts and pecan pie. Can't argue with those. I'm going to say a little bit of peanut butter as well. It's a creamy butteriness. It's nice. It's really good. Should probably add some water and see what that does, if anything. Sometimes water changes a whiskey quite dramatically, and sometimes it just makes it slightly less potent. I'm really getting the newspaper ink now. I'm joking. What the hell does newspaper ink like smell like? I don't know. Maybe newspaper ink does smell like something, but I've not read enough newspapers in my life to imprint that into my memory. Yeah. Yeah, no, it smells nice. Maybe a little sweeter, and it was actually after water. Oh, much more of that baked good. Much more baked goods on the palate. I get the blondie thing going on now. On the palate, yeah. Much crackers. Yeah. Yeah, actually those water crackers. Some really good. Those circular ones, I think they're called cars or something like that. The water crackers, however. Definitely. If there was some way to solidify this whiskey and put cheese on it, it would be very delicious. That's nice. So, for those of you wondering what the hell 95 is, let me reveal to you. This whiskey is from Outturn Distillery. Just like Ardmore, Outturn was created specifically to create whiskey for a popular blend. This time, however, it was almost a century later, and for the J&B blend in 1972, so a relatively new distillery. Just 16 years later, in 1986, that doesn't make sense. My notes are very bad at math there. So either it was 16 years later in 1988 or 14 years later in 1986, one of the two. Bad note taker. It was released as a single malt for the first time, interestingly named the Singleton of Outturn. But despite being highly acclaimed by reviewers, it was discontinued shortly after. The Singleton name now lives on through Glenord, Glendullan and Duffton. Also, I should mention, whilst the concept of maturing whiskey in bourbon and then finishing it in sherry casks is claimed to be pioneered by Glenmorangie and Balvenie, this 1986 release did exactly this, well before either of them. So, seeing as I repeated 1986 later on in my notes, I'm going to say, yeah, it was 14 years later, not 16 years later. I don't know what happened there. It's been a long day. Anyway, really impressed by this Utrusk. Definitely something I've had limited exposure to as a single malt. I think the only Utrusk I've ever had as a single malt was maybe a Cadenheads or something like that. This is very nice. Yeah. No complaints from me. I think this is delicious. And I really want to make people flapjack now. The next whiskey up is one that I actually hinted at the virtual vaults last month, and I don't think anyone caught my hint, but this one is the Wicker Dram. Initially, the nose is sooty and coastal in a very classical sense. Then abundant citrus with fresh limes and lemons, followed by some autolytic yeasty characteristics, preserved lemons, soft tarry notes, salted butter, samphire, amber malt, beach pebbles, sunflower oil, and gorse, with a scatter of mixed dry herbs. I often give the SMWS a little bit of grief for their run-on sentences. That is a very long sentence. Reduction unleashes the fruit with dried papaya, green banana, cough syrup, lemon balm, prune eau de vie, orange jelly, cantaloupe melon, salted caramel and kiwi. The palate brings a spice-infused waxy texture with paprika, chili, spiced custard, sultanas, plum wine, rancio, lemon jelly, juniper twigs, and sea breeze. Water brings out sweet grist, turmeric, Caledonian ice cream, bracken, bone-dry blanc de blanc champagne, mineral oil, cereals, breads, and fruit salad. That is just about one of the most varied tasting notes I've heard from the SMWS in recent memory. Also, I don't know what rancio is. R-A-N-C-I-O. If anyone can tell me in the live chat, no idea. I guess I could have Googled it, but it's too late now. So this is a really cool whiskey. This is from distillery 52. This is 52.29. And I believe now the second 52 we've ever had in the SMWS here in Canada, and the first since my involvement. This is bottle 1 of 171. Or, this isn't bottle number 1. This is, they all say 1. This is 1 of 171 bottles, rather. It is distilled on the 18th of June 2001. A little older. It is a first fill barrel ex-bourbon. It is a Highland malt. It is 17 years old and is 58.2% ABV. It is called the Wicker Dram, as you already know, and I am very excited to try this. 52. I wonder if anyone knows what 52 is offhand, or if anyone's frantically Googling right now. Ooh. Very nice. Very nice. 17-year-old Highland. Here we go. And that, on the nose, smells right at home. That is gorgeous. Smells like a library. It's got that leather-bound book, slightly damp paper smell. It's very nice. A library by the sea, perhaps. See what I mean by preserved lemons? It's not a fresh, zesty lemon. It's like a lemon oil, maybe. Like the kind of lemon oil that you would use to oil your fretboard on a guitar. Yeah, that is a gorgeous nose. All right, let's dive in. Okay. Okay, my apologies to the Scotch Malt Whisky Association, because I can fully understand the need for run-on sentences. That is, I think it's like 1,001 flavours all at once. Good lord. Wow. Yeah, that is all kinds of crazy fruit. That is tropical fruit, citrus fruit, it is orchard fruit, it is every fruit. It's the only thing that I'm not really getting right off the bat on the palate there is like berries. I don't get any berry fruits, but yeah, I mean, totally. It mentioned banana and papaya, sure. Orange, lemon, lime, peach, pear, plum, apple, all of the above. It is a fruit salad, but it's not just a fruit salad. It's a fruit salad with caramel sauce drizzled on it and all kinds of crazy spices mixed over it as well. It's like an Indian caramel sauce fruit salad. Wow. And it is creamy. It mentions Caledonian ice cream, which I'm assuming is a brand. I don't think there's a specific style that Scotland is known for ice cream. But yeah, it's got that rich vanilla ice cream thing going with it as well. But it also has this weird champagne yeasty dryness to it as well, with also grains. It's just a gift basket full of glory. Wow. If I was to name this whiskey personally, I would name it after one of my favourite Bare Naked Ladies albums, All Things to Everyone. That is just everything. That is Pandora's whiskey. You crack it open and just the world explodes from it. The one thing it isn't is peaty. The one thing it isn't is smoky. There's none of that. But this is about as deep and, dare I say, complex as an unpeated whiskey can be. That's very cool. Very nice. Yeah. There's nothing lacking in this. This is full flavor. This is a whole Las Vegas buffet in one glass. This is like, I was in Vegas once. I was there for a few days for Pat Dunlop's wedding, and I have to admit I was slightly dreading it. But by the time I left, I knew I was going to go back again. And I kind of want to go back. Vegas is a weird, bizarre kind of fun, and this whiskey is a weird, bizarre kind of fun. So, where is it from? I hear you crying, from those of you who haven't Googled already. Distillery 52. So I have to admit, I got this mixed up with Distillery 53. I thought we were getting another, 51? Somewhere in the early 50s is Bushmills, which we've had a couple of before, and it's really, really good. So I got very excited to have another one of these, and then I found out what this actually is and got even more excited. I mentioned in the virtual vaults after the last tasting, I mentioned that I'd never had anything from the society from this distillery, and I'm actually going to cap that even further. I've never had an independent bottling from this distillery. I've only had official bottlings, and that's really cool. So Distillery 52, of which this is the 29th release from the SMWS, is Pulteney, which of course is the home of the Old Pulteney whiskies, which is what they call their official single malts. Pulteney was licensed in 1826 and is another distillery that was only available as blends or by independent bottlers until relatively recently. And this distillery's had a very successful launch as a single malt. And it was only launched in 1997, which is surprising to many whiskey lovers because it was instantly embraced by the whiskey community and now feels like a staple that's just always been there and hopefully always will. Who doesn't love Old Pulteney? Well, actually, there's one person that doesn't love Old Pulteney. Hi, Becca. I'm sorry. You probably, if you don't like Old Pulteney, I mean, maybe buy this one because the whole point is that it might not taste like Old Pulteney. But anyway, it is known as the Maritime Malt, and for good reason. It's made in the small fishing town of Wick in the far north, and in fact, for the longest time, it was actually the most northern mainland distillery in Scotland. That is until Wolfburn came along and took that crown from them in the last few years. So yes, second release in Canada, as far as I'm aware. They're definitely the first since I've been around, and one that I don't know what else I can say. It's a 17-year-old cask strength single cask old Pulteney, or Pulteney rather, because it's not an old Pulteney because it's not an official bottling. It's just a Pulteney because it's by an independent bottler. I think that's how it works. Anyway, Pulteney or old Pulteney, whichever you wish to call it, it's gorgeous. It is very, very nice. And based on the name, the next one's going to be quite nice too, because this one was christened the Elixir of Euphoria. What a nose! Cola cubes, candy corns, rum top, and apricot flan with shisha pipe, pomegranate molasses, and polished wood. It's aromatherapy in a glass. The palate is chewy, juicy elixir of euphoria, pineapple cubes, toffee apples, Old English spangles, grenadine, and Ribena-soaked oak. Then a finishing flicker of mulled wine and wood spice. The reduced nose is a delightful chameleon of glazed plums, honey, jelly beans, golden syrup on buttered toast, and Amarena cherries. The palate now wickedly seductive and sweet, with yum-yums, Peshwari naan, dessert wine. Well, for those of you who tuned into last month's tasting, you will very much know that I love Peshwari naan. I'm also happy to say I've managed to find some here in Victoria, so I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but the Indian restaurant on Fort Street that normally does the lunch buffets, which definitely doesn't at the moment. I want to say... I can't remember the name. Taste of India, something India. Anyway, they have what they call a coconut naan on their menu, which is basically Peshwari naan, but with a bit more coconut, which is no bad thing in my books. I love coconut. Anyway, back to the whiskey. Sounds good. Sounds real good. Sounds confusing. A lot of things in those tasting notes that I have no idea what they are. I may be English, but apparently I'm not old enough to know what Old English spangles are, so please enlighten me in the comments if you do know. I am English enough to know what Ribena is. I'm also English enough to have 2 bottles of Ribena at home. Ribena is a blackcurrant cordial with other ingredients mixed in as well. It's not pure blackcurrant. There's some spice in there as well, I think. Big fan of Ribena. Ribena, water, great. Very refreshing. Also don't know what Amarena cherries are, so please let me know in the comments if you know what Amarena cherries are. I'm just failing on all fronts in these tasting notes. While I'm at it, I've never had rum top. But I have had shisha pipes and cola cubes and candy corns. I've never had an apricot flan, but I can certainly imagine what it would be like, and hopefully I won't have to imagine for much longer because I'm going to try this whiskey. This is really cool. So this is a grain whiskey. This is G7.16. It is a single grain, single cask whiskey. Incredibly, one of only 128 bottles. So particularly thirsty angels in the area, or maybe a leaky cask, or maybe something else happened that I can't think of right now. But it was distilled on the 29th of November, 1990. This is 28 years old. And it says here new charred oak barrel is the cask, but I know that was actually a finish. It was 2 years in the new oak charred barrel, or new charred oak barrel rather, and 26 years in a ex-bourbon cask before then, ex-bourbon barrel. It is from the lowland region, as most grains are, but not all. It's pretty much just said, hey, I'm a grain whiskey from the SMWS, and I'm not from Loch Lomond. This is G7.16. It is 55.1% ABV, and I cannot wait to crack into this 26-year-old grain whiskey. I love old grain, I do. If you tuned into my Compass Box tasting a couple of weeks back, you will have heard me go on at length about how much old grain is an important part of whiskey and should not be ignored. And I'm hoping this will prove that point. It is from the, I believe, Old and Dignified, I think is what this colour is. You will have seen in the slide I just put up. I'm terrible at remembering what the colours are. I think this one's Old and Dignified, but it's definitely old. Let's find out if it's Dignified. Ooh, it's got colour. Look at that. That is nice. Not that it really matters, but it's nice to look at. It only matters until you put it to your mouth, and then, you know, the taste kind of is the only thing that matters at that point. Well, on the nose. Ooh, yes. This smells a little bit rum-like. I wonder if that's what they mean by rum top. Rum top must have something to do with rum. Yeah. This smells like an expertly made Cuba Libre. It has the lime juice, the Coca-Cola, and the high quality rum on the nose. That's the first thing I get there. And I do get that dark berry, that black currant kind of thing. That I think is what they're referring as the Ribena note in there. I definitely get something that could definitely be Ribena. Mulled wine, wood spice, yeah, all the right kind of. All right. Oh. Oh my. I am highly surprised. Oh, it's a little bit smoky on the back end as well. That is really good. I'm probably from the char from the new charred oak barrel. I'm a little surprised. It tastes very European oaky. It tastes very like refill sherry, but buttery. Yes, definitely buttery. Herb butter, maybe. It's actually got the herbs mixed in with the butter, so maybe spread on an everything bagel. Sweet, definitely sweet, but not overly sweet. Cherries, definitely cherries, and orange rind. Orange rind, cherries, black currants, big, rich, deep fruits. Blood orange, specifically blood orange. Yeah, that is... That is a good whiskey. That is a very good whiskey. And yeah, I mean, no surprises. Grain whiskies from the SMWS have been absolutely excellent, and it's one of the most common questions I get is, when are we getting another old grain whiskey? Well, here is another old grain whiskey. It's also another old grain whiskey, which isn't... It's old, yes, don't get me wrong. 28 is old for a whiskey. But comparatively to some of the old grain whiskies we've had recently, it's not as old, and as such, it's a little bit more approachable in the price range as well, which is nice. You might notice although it's 28 years old, it is not a black label. It is a classic white label whiskey. All right, so let's tell you what G7 is. G7 is from the Girvan distillery, and this powerhouse of a distillery has the capacity of 115 million litres of alcohol per year, which equates to about 380 million bottles of whiskey, which is frankly ridiculous. That is a absolute crap ton of whiskey. It uses a state-of-the-art multi-pressure column still system to turn a mash of 91.5% wheat and 8.5% barley into spirit for the Grant's blends. Charles Grant Gordon built this distillery by the River Clyde in 1963 and first distilled spirit on Christmas Day, a tradition that was started by his grandfather, William Grant, at Glenfiddich Distillery, who also ran the stills for the first time on Christmas Day. And I have to say, this would make a fantastic Christmas dram. I would very much enjoy drinking this alongside a roast turkey. Excellent, excellent old grain whiskey. Yeah, it really does have that charred, slightly smoky thing on the back palate. That's really cool. 55.1% ABV, really, really approachable. I haven't added any water. It doesn't feel like I need to. Maybe I should. For science, I will add a little drop of water, but not much, because I really don't think it needs it. Yeah, as I find quite often with grain whiskey, it doesn't have as much complex fatty esters as its malt brethren. So water really just dilutes it. It doesn't really change the flavor much, in my opinion. Feel free to try it if you buy a bottle. Let me know if you disagree. I like it when people disagree with me. It gives us a chance for a conversation. Yeah, fantastic whiskey, and let's move on to the fifth whiskey of the evening. The next one is the fantastically named Papaya the Sailor Man. Aromas begin with a sweet intensity that combines peated banoffee pie with sugar-coated fennel seeds. A distinct nuttiness transpired that formed into coconut husk on a beach, surrounded by rock pools and dried seaweed. The fruitiness of plums and peaches came in rolled cocoa dust, but introduced a softer floral character like potpourri. Delicious smoked duck on the palate, with herbal hues and sea buckthorn that cut through the oils. Mango and papaya emerged in a medicinal smog that settled on carrot juice with ginger and a sprinkling of rock salt. The finish was backed by a firm wedge of tree bark, married with an opulent dark chocolate bitterness. Okay, Papaya the Sailor Man from the Lightly Peated collection. Very intriguing notes. Can't say I've ever chewed on a coconut husk, but I can understand what it might be like. Medicinal smog. Sure, that's medicinal smog. I don't know. Medicinal smog to me sounds like sounds like a term for like hotboxing with cannabis, but I'm sure that's not what they mean. All right, Papaya the Sailor Man. This is Distillery 93, and it is 93.102. It is one of 208 bottles, again from a first fill barrel. Love these first fill barrel ex-bourbons, and it's going to be really interesting this time to have a peated first fill barrel. It's from the 19th of June 2007, and it is a Campbellton malt, bottled at 57.8% ABV at 11 years old. Campbellton, fantastic region with a lot of interesting history to it. For those of you who might be, I don't quite remember what 93 is, as soon as you heard the word Campbellton, you probably realised exactly what it is. This is a distillery which I very, very much enjoy, and I cannot wait to crack this open, so I'm not going to. I'm going to do it right now. Alrighty. Yeah. Lovely. Weirdly quiet on the nose. I don't smell any peat whatsoever right now. Maybe I need to reset my senses. This information comes to you courtesy of Lawrence Graham, who taught me to smell a glass of water to reset your nose. Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, and there we go. I don't quite smell peat yet, but I at least smell lime juice. And there we go, yeah. A little bit of banana, fennel. Yeah, it mentioned something about fennel, sugar-coated fennel seeds. It's a candy I've not had for a long time. You used to get that when you left an Indian restaurant. They'd give you a handful of fennel seeds covered in candy. There is definitely peat on the palate. It plays an interesting game with the other notes there. It's peat, but it's attached. It's peat with strings attached. It's peat, but it's gingery. It's peat, but it's mangoey. It's definitely integrated peat. It's not on a separate level like sometimes, especially with this distillery, it is. It's well integrated smoke and dirt. It's dirty tasting. Rich. It's oily. Does have that medicinal smog. Yeah, it does have a little sort of iodine-y kind of a note to it. Yeah, it is quite gingery. It really is gingery. The last thing it mentions in the official notes is bitter dark chocolate. I'm getting more of a coffee, but that's the same kind of wavelength. Let's see with a bit of water. Have to be brutally honest, because I have to be brutally honest. This is what I do. This isn't my favorite from this distillery in the SMWS. I think we've had ones that in relatively recent memory that I've personally preferred. But that being said, this is still an excellent expression. And seeing as I believe all of the other ones are sold out, then this is a good second place. if you didn't manage to get one of the past releases of this from the last few months, this will do nicely. I shouldn't compare SMWS releases. It's like comparing. It's like trying to pick a favorite child. It just feels wrong after you've done it. I mean, I definitely do prefer the last one to this one, but that being said, this one's still incredible. So, what are you gonna do? Give them both a gold star, and that is how kids today all ended up with participation medals. It's not anything to do with the kids. It's not their fault. It's the adults' fault. We can't choose between one and the other, so we just say everyone wins. Yeah, it's nice. It mentions tree bark. I'm not sure what they're getting at there. I don't get much wood influence on this. The oak comes across as that much more vanilla coconutty thing, but not direct oak flavor. I'm getting tree fruit though. There is stone fruit, peach. It's actually it's like a slightly underripe peach, a smoked slightly underripe peach. Yeah, no, I really enjoy this. This is a very nice whiskey. And this is a very nice whiskey from a very nice distillery, a distillery I'm a big fan of. 93 is Glen Scotia. This classic wee Campbellton distillery is one of only 3 remaining in the region. It survived mostly by being passed around from owner to owner. In fact, for 12 months in the 50s, it was even owned by the Canadian distillers Hiram Walker. The first of these hot potato owners was West Highland Malt Distilleries Consortium, who bought the distillery in 1919, but after the financial collapse of its 5 other Campbellton distilleries, they sold it to Duncan McCallum after just 5 years in 1924. Duncan would manage this distillery for 6 years, but unfortunately, it was closed for 2 of those, so I'm not sure that quite counts. Duncan's time at Glen Scotia came to quite an abrupt end. After it reopened in 1930, he sadly committed suicide by drowning himself in the nearby loch after losing his life savings to a scam. So yeah, some cheery trivia there. I mean, suicide by drowning, Highland clearings. It's been a cheery kind of a tasting, hasn't it? But no. That aside, like, Glen Scotia is one of the smaller distilleries in Scotland. It's apparently I don't know if this is still the case, but I remember looking into it years ago and it said it had a staff of 3 people and one of them ran the gift store, which I think is hilarious. Yeah, great whiskey. It's owned by the Loch Lomond Group. So we've been seeing more and more Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia releases through the SMWS, so I'm guessing they have a pretty good relationship in terms of selling casks, and I'm, for one, very happy about that. I've been really intrigued by the Glen Scotia releases. There's been some really interesting ones, and I know it's a contentious distillery. Some people are a little iffy about Glen Scotia. I'm thinking of one person in particular who may have spent some time in the Netherlands a couple of years ago and had a Glen Scotia that wasn't released here in Canada, in the Netherlands, and thought it just tasted like trying to chew on a rubber dinghy. Yeah, it does have something of the rubber dinghy about it. This one less so than others. So I can imagine that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but for those of you who it is the Lapsang Souchong, it is gorgeous. It's a very nice, very unique distillery. Yeah, I'm impressed as always with this SMWS Glen Scotia /Cheval. All right. Time then to move on to the final whiskey of the evening. This is a fantastic name. I haven't done the Google image search to figure out what image is going to go up with this right now, but I'm hoping I find something appropriate. This whiskey is called RoboCow. The panel found themselves squarely in an old Highland farmyard at first nosing. Bags of earth, hay, silage, soot, old toolboxes, hessian, and a big medicinal aspect with notes of mercurochrome and TCP. Charred pineapple, peat oils, bacon, and salty minerals also appear. With water, the smokiness gets louder, with notes of soy sauce, burning heather, smoked lobster, and a slug of 80-shilling beer. The palate displays smoked venison, tar, gentian, a couple of iodine tablets, burnt toffee and molten marshmallows. Reduction gives aged calvados and cider apples, Parma violets, smoked barley, and cow sheds. Hence the robo-cow, I guess. So I should mention 80-shilling beer, something a lot of people in Canada won't have come across. Actually, a lot of people in England won't have come across. It's a quintessentially Scottish thing. They marked their casks of beer, or the barrels of beer back in the day, with a notation of shillings. And from what I understand, it was based on the amount of tax that was paid. So a less alcoholic keg or cask of beer would have had 60 shillings, and more 70 shillings, and even more 80 shillings. But those beers actually ended up morphing into specific styles, much like in Belgium, how you've got the Tripel and the Dubel and the Quadrupel. It's the same kind of idea. It morphed into a specific style in Scottish brewing. So 60 shilling is like a mild dark beer. 70 shilling is like a cream ale, kind of like a Boddington's or a Worthington's, and then 80 shilling is almost kind of like almost like a pale ale IPA kind of a thing. Duca's 80 shillings, or Duca's IPA was fantastic. Sorry, who's the 80 shillings we had? McEwen's 80 shillings at the Royal Oak when I worked there. McEwen's 80. That was delicious beer. Yeah, this sounds mad. It sounds as mad as the name. Can't wait to try it. Love farmyardy notes in a whiskey. It's one of those things. It's the asterisk of whiskey tasting notes I've mentioned before, where it tastes like a farmyard asterisk, but in a good way. I don't normally go around eating farmyards, but I do drink a lot of whiskeys that smell an awful lot like them. This whiskey is one of 210 bottles. It is distilled on 23rd of July 2008, making it 10 years old, or aged 10 years rather. It is from a refill barrel ex-bourbon. It is a Highland whiskey once again, and it is 59.8% ABV. And the code is 66.154. That's right. We are bookending this tasting with Ardmores. We've had one to begin with. We're having another one to end. An unpeated and a peated in perfect harmony. It's an Ardmore sandwich, this OutTurn, and I, for one, as a huge Ardmore fan, I'm very happy about that. I can't wait to try this peated Ardmore, because the unpeated one surprised me to no end, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to pull out actually this one. That was the opening drag item. This is the unpeated Ardmore from earlier today. I'm going to prime myself with another dram of this. I'm really intrigued to see if I get the base spirit notes the same between the peated and the unpeated. Alright, let's crack this guy open. Let's rip open the Robo-Cow. Stick my fingers there. Moo! Now I'm hoping, unlike the Glen Scotia, I'm hoping this one actually smells quite heavily of peat. Because I honestly, I mentioned the Glen Scotia didn't quite hit me as much as the Glen Scotia we had previously, but it's still very good. I think part of that was just that it didn't capture me on the nose as much. So if you don't really care about the nose and it's all about the palate, which for most whiskey drinkers, to be honest, it is, when you sat drinking a whiskey and enjoying a whiskey, you don't sit there nosing it, you sit there smelling it for the most part. You sit there drinking it. It's probably just as good as the last one. Anyway, let's see if this smells like it's peated. I didn't need to do that. I can smell it from here. That is like a barnyard on fire. Yep. Yep, that is like a barnyard on fire. It's damp hay. It is smoke. It is TCP. It is or iodine, as is more recognizable over here. Yeah, it is freshly laid sod. And there's soy sauce. It says that after water. It does. It has this really salty, salty, savory thing. It's like Maggi seasoning. So that's which is what's that stuff that they always complain that Chinese food has in it that is now thought of as it's going to kill you somehow, but it's actually completely safe. MSG. It smells like MSG. It smells like Maggi seasoning. MSG, by the way, in case you weren't aware, is perfectly safe. There's only been one scientific paper decrying MSG, and it was found to be less than reliable. MSG is found naturally in seaweed, so don't worry about MSG. Have your Maggi seasoning, put it in your fried rice. It is absolutely delicious, as is the smell of this whiskey. And also the taste. Wow. That is one of the peatiest Ardmores I've had. And that is incredibly interesting because I've now, in the same tasting, had the least peaty Ardmore I've ever had and potentially the most peated Ardmore I've ever had. This is the midnight and midday of Ardmore. Wow. Yet somehow beneath it all, there is an awful lot of similarity in the base spirit, which is really quite cool. I've never looked for sweet, chalky candy flavors in peated Ardmores before, but now I have. I found it. It's not just a barnyard on fire. It is a barnyard with a whole sack of sherbet on fire. Hence the Parma violets. Maybe that is one of the candies that you would get in those classic party favor bags. I now can't remember if the party favor bags was. It was definitely either the Ardmore or the next whiskey, which was the Etrusk. It was either the Ardmore or the Etrusk that had that as a tasting note, but I'm definitely getting those candy chalky flavors in both of these now. I'm going to put the Ardmore back away here and enjoy the other Ardmore. So seeing as I've already revealed this whiskey, I have prepared another slide with the revealing information, so I'm still going to play it. And instead of trivia this time, I'm going to reveal the pretty much exact recipe, I guess, of Ardmore. Ardmore uses a medium peated malt from Baird's, Bury and Crisp maltsters at between 12 and 14 ppm, or parts per million. It is mashed in a traditional cast iron copper-domed mash tun and fermented for 54 hours in wooden washbacks with a mix of Kerry and Maury yeasts to produce a cloudy wort. It is then twice distilled in onion-shaped stills with shell and tube condensers, fitted with steam-powered hotspots to replicate being coal-fired, to a strength of 67.5% ABV, before being brought down to 63.5% ABV and filled into oak casks which are matured in one of their 6 dunnage warehouses or 3 racked warehouses. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how to make an Ardmore. And now I've given you the recipe, you can all make it at home. I wish, God. If you could all make whiskey at home like this, then, I mean, my job would be much harder, but it would be quite cool. The world would be a better place if we had access to whiskies like this to be made at home, but alas, it takes a team of professionals, hundreds of years of experience, and incredibly expensive equipment to make a whiskey this good. So, Ardmore, ladies and gentlemen, it is delicious. Right, so I guess it's time to release these whiskies for sale and reveal the prices of all of them. So, without further ado, here are the prices. The first whiskey this evening, 66.159. I would call it an Ardlair. The SMWS is calling it the Ardmore, the unpeated Ardmore of tonight. This is $169.48. The second whiskey tonight, the first ever Thrusk here in the SMWS Canada, 95.32, is $144.26. The third whiskey, a whiskey which I have been looking forward to for a long time, an SMWS Pulteney, 52.29. That is a 17-year-old Pulteney for $239.13. Those 13 cents are very important. $239.13 for the cask strength single cask Pulteney. Bargain, I think. Finally, for the unpeated section of the tasting, we have the G7.16. That is the Old Girvan. The Old Girvan. The Girvan, which is from 1990 and is 28 years old. That can be yours for $312.09 for a 28-year-old whiskey. That is, again, fantastic value. Into the peated section of tonight's tasting, we start off with a 93.102. That is the Glen Scotia for $181.65. Beautiful Glen Scotia. And finally, the whiskey that I am enchanted with and has captured my soul. This is the Robo-Cow, my beloved Robo-Cow. Ardmore, peated Ardmore, 66.154, $155.57. Fantastic price for a fantastic whiskey. And I do encourage any of you who are thinking of picking up this peated Ardmore, really do think about picking up the unpeated Ardmore or Ardlair as well. It's a fantastic compare and contrast between the two of them. I've been really enjoying it. And yeah. That is the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of Canada's June OutTurn, ladies and gentlemen. It is available to purchase right now at strathliquor.com and is also available to purchase at our partner stores, Keg & Cork, Kensington Wine Market and Legacy. Right now, give them a call, go to the website, do whatever you need to do, get yourself some SMWS whiskey from the June OutTurn. It has been an absolutely fantastic tasting. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and it's not just because it was bookended by one of my favorite distilleries, two distillates, very different distillates from one of my all-time favorites. Yeah, a Thrusk, Old Pulteney, Girvan, Glen Scotia, and two Ardmores. That is a really interesting, unique lineup from the SMWS Canada. So thank you, Rob and Kelly, for bringing these to us. I've been really enjoying them. I will continue to really enjoy them. And it is time to welcome one and all to the virtual vaults. If you're watching this at the official launch, at the premiere of this video, check out the live chat right now. There will be a link to the virtual vaults. Come and join us as we discuss the last OutTurn's whiskies and probably the meaning of life and many other things, as you know. Hopefully you've been drinking along some Scotch Malt Whisky Society whiskey during this video and you've had a couple of drams and you just feel like having a chat. That is what the Virtual Vaults is all about. Join myself and join hopefully Rob and Kelly and a whole plethora of SMWS members at the Virtual Vaults on Zoom with the link in the live chat. It's been an honour and a pleasure. Good night and stay well, and I'll see you next month for July's Scotch Malt Whisky Society OutTurn. I'll also see you next week for another Drinking Out Loud video. Good night.
It was Sunday morning in our town, and I sat on my steps and I looked at the ground, and I bowed my head as they shuffle past, all the saints being called to the morning mass. And way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. And it rang for the saints and the sinners as well. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. I remember the lessons of Sunday school, and I can't help but think that maybe I'm a fool, and I see no part of a greater plan, just the joy and sorrow of my fellow man. And way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. And it rang for the saints and the sinners as well. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. So here we stand as life rushes past, between the first breath and our last. And here we stand between east and west, and here we stand between birth and death. And way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. And it rang for the saints and the sinners as well. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. I was watching my TV the other night. There was a war on the left and a war on the right. And is it any wonder it's a sort of them? There's a long way from heaven to Bethlehem. And way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. And it rang for the saints and the sinners as well. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. And it rang for the saints and the sinners as well. Way off in a distance they rang a bell. Way off in a distance they rang